We had some devastating fantasy football news from Cincinnati on Thursday, and I will get to it. I don't feel like talking about it. I'd rather roll my car into a ditch than talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it. My name is Joe Dolan, and this is the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup for Friday, October 28th, 2022.
It's time for the FantasyPoints.com Daily Lineup. Staying on top of the latest news and updates around the NFL. Rise and shine, folks. We're taking the field. Here's your host, FantasyPoints.com's Joe Dolan.
Now, before I get to that thing that I already alluded to, I'm going to have to warm up. So, let's start at the top of the lineup, and we're going to start at quarterback with the Saints and Andy Dalton. Dalton will take the reins for the Saints in Week 8 against the Raiders. Now, Dalton threw 2 pick sixes within 1 minute of each other in last Thursday night's loss to the Cardinals and ended up with 3 interceptions total on the night. Now, despite Dalton being a walking meme during that game, he will start for the Saints, and this is with Coach Dennis Allen saying Jameis Winston is fully healthy. This obviously speaks to what the Saints think of Jameis right now, though it's hard to trust Allen's decision-making given what this team looks like overall. That being said, the Saints offense is actually improving. And though he did throw the 3 picks last week, our great coach thought Dalton threw the ball well overall. I mean, that's but Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play situation? Still, Dalton did have moments of clarity during that game. Now, and remember, he's doing this without Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry, who have each been out a month and look like they are not going to play this week. Dalton for fantasy is a little more than a mid-range quarterback too. So if he keeps throwing pick sixes and the Saints can't get healthy on defense, especially in the secondary, he'll keep having to come from behind in garbage time. In our first running back spot, we might not have Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard has missed back-to-back practices with an ankle injury picked up late in Week 7's upset of the Bucs. Now, Hubbard was spotted riding the bike in a non-contact jersey on Wednesday. Now, if he can't go in Week 8 against the Falcons, D'Onta Foreman would obviously handle a bigger workload, with Raheem Blackshear also mixing in. 2 straight DMPs are not a good sign for Hubbard's Week 8 availability. Now, I'll admit I was not into this backfield. I said as much on this show. These 2 guys proved me completely wrong last week, that being Foreman and Hubbard, and it also helped that they finally got a competent NFL quarterback performance from P.J. Walker. Color me skeptical going forward, but if Hubbard is out this week, Foreman, you could fire up as a strong running back too. I'm just being informed that Raheem Blackshear went to Rutgers. We've talked a lot about Rutgers running backs on this program the last couple of weeks, by the way. Rah, rah, are you? Rah, rah, are you? Rah. Is that how the cheer goes? James Conner, our RB2, seems to be trending to a return. Conner, who has a rib injury, was limited at Thursday's practice. This is per Darren Urban of the Cardinals' official website. This is now 2 straight days of limited work for Conner. Conner's missed the last 2 games with the injury. Now, here's what's interesting. Eno Benjamin's performance against the Saints last Thursday night was by far the best performance by a Cardinal running back this season. So if Conner returns, it'll be very interesting to see the backfield split if there is one at all. Benjamin scored 23.3 PPR fantasy points on just 48 offensive snaps in Week 7. Conner has 50.3 fantasy points this season on 189 offensive snaps and has looked, for the most part, sluggish. Also, you might remember he scored like 3 touchdowns every game last season and hasn't found the box once this year. Both backs are flex options if Conner is active until we see the potential split. In our wide receiver 1 spot, we pour one out for JaMarr Chase. Chase is reportedly dealing with a hip issue that is expected to sideline him 4 to 6 weeks, per Adam Schefter of ESPN. Now, what an absolute piece of trash news bite, and I'm going to tell you why. One of my subscribers in Discord yesterday alerted me to the fact that there were rumors flying around about Chase potentially having a serious hip injury. And of course, as with any good rumor, it starts on Reddit and Twitter, and it got posted there, and I saw the rumor. And the thing that stinks is, like, I saw it at the time, and you want to tell the subscribers in Discord, hey, there's this rumor going around, but you also don't want to freak them out because of some rando on Reddit. And the guy essentially said, hey, my brother or my cousin or somebody knows a guy who works in a orthopod's office or an orthopedist's office or whatever doctor works on a hip, and said that JaMarr Chase came in for some treatment and his injury is way worse than they're letting on. That was essentially the crux of the post. Turns out that guy was true. That guy was right. I didn't want to believe it. Unfortunately, it's true. Now, Chase played through the hip injury last week and had a dominant performance with 8 catches for 130 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns against the Falcons, but he tweaked it at the end of the first half. He returned to the game, but clearly played through something more sinister than just a pulled muscle. According to the Athletic's Paul Dehner, it could be an avulsion fracture for Chase. But an avulsion fracture, I picked up from Dr. Edwin Porras, and basically means that like a bone comes loose and separates your hip flexor from your body. Does not sound fun. Now, per Dr. Porras, Chase is back in 4 to 5 weeks at best, if that is the case. Now, according to the Cincinnati Enquirer's Kelsey Conway, quote, "From the sources I spoke with about JaMarr Chase's hip injury, the reason the timeline is so up in the air regarding his return is that the team hopes, because of his physical makeup, JaMarr's hip will heal faster than the average person. We'll see if they put him on IR, but remember, if he goes on IR, he has to miss 4 games. That seems to be the low end of outcomes here." Now, for those of you wondering about the other players for fantasy, Mike Thomas is the Bengals' top perimeter backup, but he's a 7-year vet in his career and has averaged 0.51 yards per route run this year, which is second fewest among wide receivers with 75 or more routes run. He has 30 catches in 7 seasons. By the way, the only wide receiver with 75 or more routes run who has a worse yards per route run than Mike Thomas, former Bengal AJ Green, of course. The reality is this likely means more targets for T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Hayden Hurst, as opposed to someone else who will emerge here, whether it be Thomas or Stanley Morgan, who, by the way, is dealing with a hamstring injury. This whole offense gets a downgrade, which is a crying shame because it was cooking. The Bengals were first in the NFL in pass rate over expectation in each of the past 2 weeks for fantasy points data, and Joe Burrow was absolutely scorching hot. In our second wide receiver spot, Deebo Samuel is up in the air. Deebo hasn't practiced in back-to-back days as he deals with a hamstring injury. Coach Kyle Shanahan called Deebo, quote, day-to-day on Monday. But it's very much notable that the Niners have their bye in Week 9 after this weekend's tilt with the Rams. It's possible Deebo sits this week and gets 2 full weeks of rest before the home stretch. Obviously, he needs to be monitored on Friday, but this is trending in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, backup wide receiver Juwan Jennings also hasn't practiced in back-to-back days with a hamstring injury of his own. Ray McLeod would be a pretty big DFS beneficiary if both guys can't go, though of course I'd expect Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk to really suck up some extra targets. In our flex spot, we have a new chief. The Chiefs acquired Cadarius Tony from the Giants on Thursday in exchange for a 3rd-round compensatory pick and a 2023 6th-round pick, per Tom Pelissero of NFL Network. In a tweet shortly following the trade, Tony seemed to indicate that he is fully healthy and is not dealing with the hamstring injury the Giants said he was. I'm not sure how much I believe that. Tony has not played since week 2 and has 0 receiving yards this year. Not only is his health in question, but so is his desire to actually play the game. That being said, he's also an electric playmaker, in theory. One who averaged 2.14 yards per route run as a rookie, one of the 10 best marks in recent history. The Chiefs are paying relatively handsomely for Tony's potential, and it's easy to see why. On the flip side, it's also easy to see why the Giants were willing to move the player. GM Joe Shane and Coach Brian Daboll were not part of the regime that drafted Tony, and clearly the two parties did not see eye to eye dating back to the spring. If Tony plays to his talent level, this trade will look like a steal for the Chiefs. If Tony's charade doesn't change, the Giants will laugh all the way to the bank. For fantasy, Tony is a much more intriguing bench stash now than he was 2 weeks ago. That's pretty evident. While this opens up the path for Wan'Dale Robinson to be the Giants' wide receiver 1 the remainder of the year. I obviously prefer Robinson to Tony, but for instance, I prefer Tony to Sky Moore now, if you're still holding Sky Moore. I'm Joe Dolan. This has been Week 8 of the NFL season and Week 8 of the regular season version of the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup. Remember to comment on the video, click like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is now up and over 100,000 views, and I really can't thank everybody enough for tuning in. Our viewership is growing, and it's loyal. So I really appreciate that. Go to fantasypoints.com, subscribe to the website using code lineup22, get an extra 10% off a site that is already 25% discounted, and get access to our subscriber Discord where I frequently answer questions throughout the week. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy this weekend's games. Enjoy the World Series tonight. Go Phils. And I'll talk to you next week.